Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Jacobson, and it's a pleasure to share a few words with all of you this evening. And being that this Shabbos, meaning coming this weekend, is the beginning of a new special month in the Hebrew calendar, so we shall talk about love. You've heard of this word before, I assume. As some say, you can't live with it, you can't live without it. It's one of these elusive, mysterious forces in life that some people would rather do without, and some people can't have enough of it. So, obviously Judaism has to say about everything, and every Jew has their opinion. Has much to say on this topic. Being that it's the month of Elul, as I said, Elul, as it is with every Hebrew month, a theme I've often discussed here, that in Judaism, time equals energy. So before Einstein, when physics did not yet understand or appreciate the nature of time, so in science, time was seen, I think over 100 years ago, as just an invisible, some said an imaginary creation by human beings just to have efficiency. So we had calendars that measured days and nights following the sun or the moon or whatever it may be. But with the new developments in the beginning of the 20th century, it became very clear that just as space is a critical parameter of existence, so is time. Time and space. Or as some people would call it today, time, space, and man. So, the truth is, Judaism, going back to maybe one of its earliest texts, actually a Kabbalistic text called the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. Some attribute it to Abraham. Been translated by Aryeh Kaplan into English with excellent introduction and commentary. So this book of Sefer Yetzirah is based on actually the structure, what we call in Hebrew, Olam Shana Nefesh, which is an acronym of the word Oshan. So when you look at the story of Mount Sinai, the revelation at Sinai, so there's Vahar Sinai Oshan, and the Mount Sinai smoked, was covered in smoke or covered in clouds. The different meanings of the word Oshan. Question is, why is it so relevant to know that it was covered in cloud? So Oshan is the acronym of Elam, Shana, Nefesh. Elam is space, Shana is time, Nefesh is soul. So our lives are all based on this triangle of the interaction between space, time, and the human being. This is today common science, common physics. Once upon a time it wasn't. But in Jewish thought, this has always been a critical component, and that's why sanctifying time and conquering time has always been an aspiration in Jewish teachings. So conquering space is something everyone's aware of. It's basically the march of progress through history is human beings conquering space. We've taken wildernesses, we've taken uncivilized territory, we cleared it from wildlife. We tamed elements and we created a space for ourselves. We conquered space. Now we're attempting to conquer outer space. But time is something no one has ever conquered. Because time you can't control. The clock ticks whether you like it or not. Whether you could actually conquer space is another question. But at least we think we can. Time, however, is what we call beat the clock. We have deadlines. Time ages everybody. And yet, Jews took on this challenge to conquer time, not in the sense that they can squeeze more activities into 24 hours, but it depends how you use those 24 hours. So the Zohar has a very fascinating statement. It says, when it says by Abraham, Avram Zokin, and Abraham aged. And then there's an additional two words that seem to be redundant. Uba Bayamim, and he came into his days. So the Zohar, the classic text of Kabbalistic texts, authored by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai documented by his student Rabbi Abba, close to 2,000 years ago, time of the Talmud, asked the question, what's this addition of Baba Yom, and he came to his days? It says he's aged. What is it adding? And explains, Baba Yom means B'yom Shleimim. He has complete days. For us, every second in time is like a life, it's energy. For us who do not use a moment, it's like a dead energy. Once a moment has passed and you've not used it for anything positive, it's forever irretrievable. Abraham, in addition to getting older and aging like everyone does, he also had an additional quality of virtue. Well, Baba Yom, he had complete days. Every day, every moment of energy was used to its fullest. Of course, that's a quite achievement. Nobody likes to know how much time they waste. We wouldn't like to keep an accounting of that. How much time we spend on wasted time. Obviously, you can say everything is not wasted, but you know what I'm talking about. Wasted time, especially today with all the different gadgets that we have. So, the way we conquer time is not necessarily by, as I said, you can't stretch the day, but you can take it and says, Yom Shekule Yaruch, you can make a day that it's a dead day, meaning that the energy was wasted, or it's a day that comes alive. When it comes alive and you use time properly, that energy that it produces is forever. 1 second you can change a person's life. So even though the second passes, the life change does not. So quality there trumps quantity. And that's why in Judaism you find the contents of Mekadesh Yisrael v'Azmanim, sanctifying time. Kiddush HaChodesh, we sanctify the moon. Every month we go out and we bless the new moon. So though we can't control the moon's phases and we can't control the march of time, but we can control our relationship with it. And that was a bigger achievement. Shabbos, every seventh day, no matter what, we conquer another day. We conquer the seventh day. Holidays, even more than Shabbos. Shabbos, it says, its holiness, Mekasher V'Kaima, comes from above. We don't control the seventh day of the week. It comes whether we like it or not. Even though there is a law that says that if you're stuck in the wilderness and you don't know the calendar, you know what day is Shabbos, you have nowhere to check, and you don't have your mobile with you, what you do is you just start counting 7 days, and whenever that seventh day comes, that's Shabbos, even though it may be Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it may be. So we have some aspect of control there too. When it comes to holidays, is we designate, the new moon is designated, in the olden days, in the times of the temple, was designated by witnesses, but even today, when it's all pre-ordained, we know exactly when the new moon will be, it's still considered to be something that Mekadesh is Azmanim, that we humans sanctify. The point is, we cannot control 24 hours in the day or 7 days in the week or the days of the year, but we can determine how we'll use that day. And as such, every moment in time is considered to be energy, a life. And we're allocated a certain amount of energy in our lives. You can call it seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Every aspect of all these time divisions, each have their own spiritual significance. Here's not the place to go into all of that. One of the books we're planning to do is called Inside Time, where we discuss all the different aspects and how they all have their own particular energy. In Kabbalistic teachings, it says that the 24 hours in the day, each hour has one of the 12 hours of the day and 12 hours of the night. Each one has one of the tziruf and one of the configurations of the divine name. To the point that there are great people who are in touch with the energy of time, without even looking at a clock, can know what hour it is based on the energy they sense. Maybe some of you have achieved that state. But to go back to the month of what we're in right now, so each month has its power. What is the power of Elul? So we'll call it the month of love. Some call it the month of Chodesh Harachmim, the month of compassion. But I'm using specifically the word love. I'm familiar with the book 60 Days that I proposed. Talk about the different acronyms in the word Elul. What does the word Elul mean? So it has acronyms, and one of the most famous and classic one is the 4 letters of Elul. Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed is Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. It's from a book of Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, which literally means, I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. 4 words. The beginning of those 4 words is Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. And as such, Elul is connected to that relationship, and it's fitting, it's not just happens to be a coincidence, is because in this month of Elul we prepare for the new year, and the new year is about renewing a relationship with God. We're renewing a relationship with our own souls. Why does it have to be renewed? Well, first of all, anything that is alive has to constantly be dynamic, and vitality means it's constantly renewed. The same reason you have to breathe every second. So anything with life is always a constant movement. Life is about movement. Kol chai misnenea. Life and movement are synonymous. If you want something to grow, it's continuously reviving, revitalizing, re-energizing it. So if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying, as they say. That's what life is about. So that's in general. In the context of the Jewish calendar, once a year there's a overall renewal, which is Rosh Hashanah, the new moon of the new year. We call it V'chedesh Hazeh. We call it Tiku B'chedesh Shefer. It's a renewal. And but additionally, as I've shared often here, in the Jewish calendar there's also a fascinating drama and story that's unfolding. It's a story of love lost and love regained. Because when you talk about love, you cannot be naive. We know that love brings many beautiful things, but also brings a lot of pain in life. Once upon a time, well, not so long ago, I remember I was traveling somewhere, and the program, for speaking engagement, the program director called me to just plan the topic. I think I've shared this more than once here. It's always funny every time I mention it. And then she asked me. She said, "So what are the top 10 topics out there?" I said, "I don't know about the top 10. I'll give you the top 2. The first one is always love, relationships, sexuality, marriage, anything in that category. And topic number 2 is pain and suffering, anxiety, depression, everything in that category." So she said, without missing a beat, she tells me, those aren't 2 topics, it's the same thing. So yeah, you could see it as a double-edged sword, the 2 sides of the coin. When you're open enough to let someone into your life, meaning you're vulnerable, there's always potential 2 ways. It could be very gratifying, but you can also get hurt. When you have your defenses up, and you have all your mechanisms, complex and sophisticated armor that protects you from ever being hurt, it means also no one can get in and no one can get out. So love has its both sides. I know we'd love to have it one way, meaning that when you want to let something in, you let something in, and you don't let in any type of hurt, but it doesn't really work that way. Once you're vulnerable, you're vulnerable. So, how is it the story of love lost and love gained? Because, as I mentioned last week and many times, and I lay it out in the book 60 Days in Detail, which begins this Friday, the Shabbos, Sunday, and so on, the 60-day journey. And that is, in the calendar you have the beginning of Jewish history. In the formal sense, I'm not counting Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, is the Jews' exodus from Egypt, which is Chodesh Hazeh Lachem. That's when they actually receive the blessing, the first mitzvah, which is the blessing of the new moon. God points to the heavens in Egypt and tells Moses, just as you see now the new moon being renewed, so to your people, the nation of Israel, will be renewed, and this will happen many times. So even when they're at the moment of extinction, they'll be reborn, just like a new moon. And begins Passover, the first holiday of all. And we actually count, even though Rosh Hashanah is considered the new year, so-called the natural order of the year, but the new year of months, we call Chodesh Rishon. The first month is the month of Nisan. Actually, in the Bible, you don't even have names for the Hebrew months. They're by numbers. Nisan is month 1, Iyar is month 2, Sivan, when the Torah is given, is month 3, and actually Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, is considered month 7. And then we leave Egypt 50 days later. They arrive at Sinai. 40 days later, Moses comes down from the mountain and sees the people had built a golden calf and betrayed God. And he marches back up on the mountain, breaks the tablets, and goes back up on the mountain to ask for forgiveness. So love was betrayed. The relationship was betrayed. Sinai is considered a marriage. Yom Chasanos is at Mountain Torah. The Sinai itself was like a canopy. That's wwhy we have a canopy at a wedding, is because the canopy was used at Sinai. And Moses goes back on the mountain and stays there till when? Till this weekend, till Rosh Chodesh. And he's unsuccessful. Consider that these days are called like Yemei Kas, days of wrath, where God rejects his request for forgiveness. But then he goes up a third time, the same day or the next day. There are different opinions, and again 40 days. So here we go, 50 days from Passover to Sinai, 40 days until he breaks the tablets, another 40 days to Rosh Chodesh, and then a third set of 40 days. So it's 120 plus 50, 170 days from the day they left Egypt. Is what day in the year? Yom Kippur. Moses comes down with the second tablets, and Salachti Kidvarecha, God says, you've prevailed, and I will forgive. And that's why it's the holiest day of the year. Most people have no idea why Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the year. Why that day? Why not another day? Because that's the birth of hope. After betrayal, after things were broken, after loss, Moses achieved the greatest thing in history, the ability to rebuild. It took 40 days for him to receive the law. It took 80 days to receive forgiveness. So it's all a cycle, and it's not an accident. It starts with Passover, ends with Yom Kippur, and then comes Sukkot, which is its own story of celebrating that. Sukkot essentially is the celebration of the hope that we regained on Yom Kippur, concluding with the climax of Sukkot, Simchas Torah. So you see, the calendar is not just a technical calendar, it's built on essentially a story of life. And who does not have this story, this drama that I just described? We all begin with innocence lost. For some people that's where it ends. But the story of this season touches us. It shouldn't end there. You can lose something, but you can regain. And then you can become even stronger than it was in the first place. Because what Moses gained on Yom Kippur was far greater than what he received on Shavuos, 120 days before that. So, the month of Elul, therefore, plays a critical role because it's essentially the bulk of the time that Moses is on the mountain for the third time. And that's why it's called the month of compassion and the month of love. Anila Dei Dividei Dili, because he rebuilt a relationship with God, with spirit, a relationship between existence and the divine. And this becomes a model for us how we rebuild our relationships. And how we can build relationships in the first place that should be healthy and should also have a built-in immune system that should there be a challenge, we can learn to correct, repair, and improve. So in truth, Elul is actually an excellent time-tested model, thousands of years old, of how one discovers love, how one maintains love, and above all, how one deals with the challenges around love. So it's one thing to fall in love and not be challenged. Another is when you have to face the realities of life, and we all make our mistakes, and how do you retain that type of connection, even when there may have been a betrayal, or there may have been hurt and pain, and so on. So there's much to say on such a broad topic. I'm going to focus in primarily in this verse, Anila Dei Dividei Dili, and demonstrate what I've often said in this class, that where my focus here is a lot of technical details, which you can go to many classes, teach you the commentaries, and all the different opinions and so on. But I try to focus here on the relevance, the operative word being relevance. What is the relevance to our lives of these ideas? Why should we care about Elul? And in the process, we discover that the Jews are not here by accident for thousands of years. There's a profound wisdom and experience that was passed on from generation to generation. Sadly, has very much been lost in our time. So today we either have mechanical Jews or cultural Jews who grew up with it because simply that's what their families taught them, have no clue why it should be relevant to them, except that it's just part of their fabric and part of their flesh and blood, and very hard to break out of culture. And the majority of the Jewish people today who have no clue altogether what Judaism is for them, and that's why you have such high rates of assimilation. Imagine if people realize the indispensable message and the power that Judaism can provide them. Not only wouldn't it be difficult for people to embrace, people would be running after it. So how do you present this product in such a fashion? And above all, the challenge is not to find some type of new age and creative, innovative ways. It's really to go back to the original before it's been jaded and been trapped and become so much part of the stereotypes that often are so true about Judaism and religion in general. Its irrelevance, its dogma, its condescension, its judgment, its blindness, Most people think faith is basically blind faith is the absence of reason, a crutch. I remember once interviewed on a radio show, and the guy who was interviewing me was a particularly nasty individual, considered himself an intellectual as well, a nasty intellectual. Well, I'll just tell you, from my point of view, he was a pseudo-intellectual, and he was, challenging me, and he threw out this cynical question. Suddenly, he said to me, "So tell me, Rabbi, this voice dripping with cynicism. Do you ever have a crisis of faith? So I said to him, "Yeah, every second of my life." And I remember that was like took him aback. He thought I'm like one of these glazed eyes guys that just I've seen the light, I've drank the Kool-Aid, and that was it. So I said to him, every second of my life. I said, let me ask you something. Do you think a life of faith is easier or harder than a life of no faith? He says, of course it's easier. You have a crutch. Anytime you have a problem, all you do is you say it's God's problem. You turn to God, you pray. Whereas, when you don't have faith, you got to rely on your own resources and have to work hard. That was his so-called brilliant philosophy. So I responded. I wasn't looking to humiliate him or embarrass him. So I said to him, let me ask you something. If that's the case, so why, if you have no need for faith and no God, why do you expect justice altogether? Why, for example, would the Holocaust bother you? And I asked him if it bothers him. He said, of course, yes. I said, why would it bother you? Who says we live in a world that requires justice? It's dog eats dog, survival of the fittest. Just like in the wild, which animal will prevail over which? The strongest one. There's no justice. If a deer happens to be too weak or too stupid or too slow, it's dead, basically. And the predators that are the most wily and manipulative are the ones that prevail. Why is it different in the human race? The Nazis were more manipulative, and that's that. Too bad. Survival of the fittest. And he really had nothing to say. I said, if you have no faith and there's no need for justice, who said there's justice? Where'd you get this? Where do you have this blind faith in justice? I said, I will tell you, life of faith is far more difficult. Because you think faith is for children. A juvenile thing, like, you can't cross the street by yourself, so a baby will hold on to the parent cross the street. I said, faith is not the absence of reason. Faith comes after reason. Realizing that reason is not adequate to answer some of the most important questions in life. And I asked him, do you ever fall in love? He said, yes. I said, was that an act of faith or act of reason? Some call it an act of insanity, actually. My point being, of course, is that he had no understanding what faith is, or really thought it through. It was just mumble. He was just mouthing slogans, which is not necessarily always the sign of a real intellectual. But I didn't have to point that out. The point is, I wasn't really speaking to him anyway. I was speaking to the audience that was hearing the radio show. Once you have experience, you use the host for your agenda. I didn't really care what he concludes or doesn't conclude. But the point that I wanted to make was that I told him a person of faith has to struggle every second with the biggest question in life. How does a good God allow innocent people suffering? If you have no faith, you don't have that problem. The truth is you have the problem because there is faith in everyone. Everyone has a problem with that. There's no person on earth that has any type of sensitivity or humanity that sees a little child suffering, is going to say, hey, too bad, Some people suffer, some don't. There are cynics and there are people that say that too. But most people won't admit that. So why does it bother you? So the point being is that Judaism, unfortunately, as I said, going back, has been rendered today either irrelevant or cultural or programming mechanical. And to relate to it as a relevant blueprint for life, indispensable blueprint, I should add, is something that most of us find hard-pressed to do. Now, I'm not saying this just because I like to focus on the relevance. It happens to be my own speaking to myself as well. I grew up in a traditional Jewish world, so I'm very familiar with its strengths and weaknesses. And for me, this was the biggest dilemma in my life, and continues to be. How to make it relevant. And if it's not relevant, ultimately, there's no way that intelligent people are going to embrace something, especially with passion. It's not relevant to their lives. Yeah, you could pass it on out of guilt, or out of responsibility or obligation, but how powerful can that really be? The fact is, things that are passionate are the things that last. The things that are just done by rote or mechanically maybe can last to a certain extent, Number one, they create a dissonance that's very deep. We almost like living a double life. Your passions are going one place and your mechanics are going in another. And secondly, ultimately, it wears down. And I don't know how many generations something like that can last. So to me, this was the biggest question. If Judaism passed on so many generations, and Jews are known to be pretty intelligent people, could it be that they were just blindly accepting things mechanically? Maybe some, but I can't believe that this was the story all the way through history. And then when you look at people like Abraham and Moses, these are people who paid heavy prices. These are intelligent people, brilliant people, who are revolutionaries, nonconformists. So Elul has within it, like every part of Judaism, if you dig deep enough, you find, without creating any new religion and new perspective, it's not a new age thing, you just strip it away from all the layers that have become so dominant in Jewish life, which is country club mentality. I don't go to your synagogue, I don't go to yours, this is how you dress, this is how you don't dress. You go to the spirit of a soul, and a soul has no labels. Anything that is real is not defined by man-made definitions, and then you realize and come to understand the power of a month like Elul and its significance. So the acronym Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li. The only thing I couldn't figure out, which I will address, was I tried to fit it into the 3 words, 4 letters. Love is also 4 letters, like Elul, L-O-V-E. So maybe some of you are linguistic, can work on some of the letters. I know you've once contributed your input on something I said here. Maybe we can fit the L-O-V-E to the 4 secrets of love that I find hidden, that you can find hidden in, as I will discuss, in the Ani L'Deidi Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed of Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li. Okay? So that would be your contribution, if possible. Then it would really work well, because then we have L-O-V-E, a definition of what real love is. So the 4 words, Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li, is a verse in the book of Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. And it is, to really appreciate it, we can compare it to another verse in Song of Songs, which says the same 4 words, but in the reverse order. There's another verse that goes, V'Deidi Li V'Ani Lo, my beloved to me and I to him, which is essentially the same. Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li is I to my beloved and my beloved to me. There it's my beloved to me, V'Ani Lo, and me to him. So, where does it begin? From you or from your beloved? 2 verses. And the commentaries, the Medrash, and especially in Zohar and Hasidic teachings, speaks about what it's called in Aramaic, you say Zoharic language, Susa de Latata and Asarusa de La'ela. Introduce it to these 2 terms. It really means the Sarusa in Aramaic means Heserus. It means an awakening. There are 2 ways to ignite a spark. One is you initiate it from the bottom up. The other way is initiated from the top down. In other words, in simple language, it can mean this: you're looking for a solution to your problems. Do you dig deep inside your own resources and initiate, or some grace from heaven, or someone gives you a gift from above? That's the distinction. Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li, which will be Elul, as we shall discuss, is an initiation from Ani, from me. I initiate. V'Deidi Li V'Ani Lo is that it's being initiated by your beloved, which is a good question also in a relationship. Who's to blame? Who should be the initiator? And this is the games people play of deciding. Why should I say I love you? You should say I love you first before I reciprocate. And there are people who have their lives standing on principle and maybe never getting what they want, which we shall discuss as well. So Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li essentially is putting the onus right on you, Ani. It always begins with you. Look at yourself, not at the other. We'll soon talk about that more in detail. But that's the contrast. In the calendar structure, and that you'll see here how it all fits in so eloquently. In the calendar structure, the month of Nisan, who initiated the exodus from Egypt? It wasn't the people. Yes, they cried out and they wished for it, but it was God. V'Deidi Li V'Ani Lo, that was called the classical Asusa de Leila, where God took the people out, as the verse says, Al Kamfin Nesharim, on the wings of eagle, like on wings of an eagle, wings of eagles, and God led them out. He initiated. And then they reciprocated. But there's always a problem when it's initiated from above. It may be easier because you don't have to do any work, and at least in the beginning, and someone else is lifting you out of your problems. The problem with that is you don't own it. It's not yours. And that's exactly what happened. Mount Sinai was also an example of from above. Matan Torah. What does Matan Torah mean? A gift. Matan is a word in Hebrew, matana, a gift. When something is given as a gift, it's great to get a gift, but there's an element of it that questions how much have you earned. So the Talmud says you don't give a gift to someone unless they're worthy of it, but still, it's still a gift. Which is why in Torah law and halacha, and as well as in constitutional law in the United States, for example, the power of a gift is not as permanent as the power of, let's say, an inheritance, or when you acquire something by purchasing it. When Abraham was offered the gift of Hebron, when he was looking for a burial spot for his wife, Sarah, they wanted to give it to him as a gift, and he refused. He wanted to pay for it, because he wanted it to be permanent. If it was given as a gift, with a gift, there's always the option the person who gifted you can come back and say, hey, I want to give back. You're dependent on them. Even buying it, you still see that they're still arguing today over Hebron, who owns it, thousands of years later. But Abraham's foresight was unbelievable. He realized that this is going to be a sacred ground, and there's going to be wars over it. So he decided to pay for it. It's documented in the Bible how he bought it, and it remained a Yerusha. So Yerusha has what the Gemara Talmud says, Ein la hefsek. Yerusha means something that's an inheritance, does not have any, cannot be what's the word, hefsek, cannot, does not seize, it's permanently yours. As opposed to matana is a gift from above, a matana yesh la hefsek, and has conditions. You can make a condition and so on. So when Matan Torah was given, it's true, they had earned it to some extent. They did count 49 days of the Omer, but fundamentally Matan Torah was a gift from above. Which is why the Talmud says, actually, that Meidor Rabbi L'Araisa, that after the Sinai, there was still a certain complaint. The Jews could always claim, hey, you gave us the Torah, but did you really ask us? Was it coercion? And that's why you have Purim, the Talmud says, in this Sugi and Shabbos, in the tractate, where it talks about the whole story of Sinai. That's why it came Purim, v'kiblu Yehudim, asher echel alasis, that they received that which there was once given to them. Purim was the confirmation from below that not only was it given to us from above, we now are receiving it through our own efforts. So Purim is like the conclusion of Matan Torah. Interestingly, Purim, Yom Kippurim, sounds alike, right? So the Tikkun Zohar says that Yom Kippur is similar to Purim. Yom Kippur, on a different level, is also the same type of confirmation. What happened after Matan Torah? It was a gift from above. What happens when you don't own something completely? You lose it. There's an expression. A person has more pleasure, more desire, something $1 you earn on your own than $9 given to you as a gift. So with $9 million or $9 or $9,000, whatever it is, you can buy a lot more than with $1. But you also blow it quicker because you haven't earned it. When you earn something, it's yours, and it has a person has particular care over their own earnings. And that's what happened. Matan Torah was given from above. 39 days later, they built a golden calf, defying the second commandment, you shall not build false gods. How is that possible? So without going into a whole discussion on that, it's possible when you don't own something completely. And actually Moses, in his brilliant lawyer mind, actually used the fact that the Jews had not received it from below as actually one of the arguments that preserved the Jewish people, because God said they accepted my 10 commandments, and then they go ahead and defied it. They married me, and now they built a golden calf. Total betrayal. So Rashi says a fascinating thing. You know what Moses did? He said to God, the contract, the ksuba, is the 10 commandments, right? It was engraved on stone, the tablets. I never delivered it to them. Because remember, Moses returned with the tablets after 40 days. They built the golden calf. They never had actually received the tablets. They heard it. They heard the words from Sinai, but they never received the contract. So basically Moses was using a loophole by saying they never received it. So they didn't sign it. They read it, but they didn't sign it. And that actually helped and worked. Obviously, this is not some type of manipulation. He had a point. His point was that the people had not really embraced it yet on their own. Obviously, he knew quite well that they sinned gravely and it wasn't a mistake. But he wanted God to give them the ability to have hope and forgiveness. And then, of course, he let them have it, which is why we work so hard in trying to regain favor through forgiveness and the prayers and the slichas and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, to reconnect. And then Moses comes down with the second tablets. And these tablets were not broken.